So if you're following along in the tutorial, the first section you want to go to is 3.3.1. That's for inserting the BrEdHead into the breadboard. We are going to start by just taking the, there we go, BrEdHead and inserting it so that there's one pip left at the bottom here. And we're at the very bottom of the breadboard, which is where all the larger numbered rows are. So you see A, B, C, D, E, F, G, H, I, J, those are all at the top. And at the bottom, you'll see everything aligned that way. So there we go. It's very important. If you have a breadboard that's a little bit different than this, then the rule here is that you want to keep the red on the very left, and then blue, and then red, and then blue. That'll align properly with how the power is distributed to the board. Now, at every step of the way, I like to power on. There you go. I like to power on and make sure everything's working properly. So you see the little power LED is on. Transmit and receive LEDs are off because we're not transmitting and receiving anything. Next, in section 3.3.2, we're going to put a power LED. Now this LED is going to tell us if we have power to these rails here and these rails here. We only need to look at one spot though, since all these rails are common together. The red connects with the red and the blue to the blue. We're going to put our power indicator LED up here. Now, an LED is a light emitting diode. You can read more about that on Wikipedia, but the gist of it is that the amount of current that goes through the light emitting diode determines the number of photons that come out, minus some quantum efficiency. And that current will only flow in one direction. So we have to make sure that we're aligned properly. Now I'm going to show you the real way to determine if the polarity of a diode. Let's see if we can see that there. Out of focus, and let's see if we can do that. I'll tell you what, I'll put a picture up of the inside of this so you can see. I put this thing on manual focus. There's going to be a positive side of a diode and a negative side. Now, right out of a bag, the positive side is usually the one with the longer lead. However, once I trim the leads, like so, you'll find that rule no longer holds. I've just trimmed them. Now they're the same length. Now what can you do? Well, I don't want you to be helpless. I want you to understand how to tell the real difference. That'll be in this picture that I'll put right about here on the screen. There we go. You'll see that there's a positive anode and a negative cathode. The voltage into the circuit needs to come in through the anode and then out through the cathode. And the way they're going to wire this is that we're going to have the positive voltage rail, the red rail here, going to the anode of the LED, and the cathode is going to go to what's called a current limiting resistor. Now, an LED will allow current to go through it. It doesn't limit the amount of current. And if you have too much current going through an LED, it'll actually start to burn up and turn brown. It's probably emitting blackbody radiation a lot, very similar to how a candle or a toaster emits light when it's hot. We're going to come out the cathode to a resistor down to ground. All right? And ground, of course, is the blue rail here. So I'm just going to take my LED, use my flat nose pliers I was telling you about before, and I'm going to grip it just like this. I'm going to grab the anode side, bend it very carefully over here, go out some length. Now you might have to adjust. I usually like to put it into the board and get an idea for how far I need to take it. So it looks like it needs to go about that far. So now I'm going to bend it right there. Sorry, I got to do it to the camera here. There we go. Now we've bent the LED. Now we need to start actually trimming this down. We don't want it to stick out of the board. Remember our rules of breadboarding. You don't want anything to stick out of the board more than it needs to. So I'll trim that off camera over here. Now I have a well-trimmed LED. Anode in the positive side. There we go. Anode in the positive side of the breadboard here. And the cathode is going to go out to one of these rows here. Doesn't matter which, really. I chose row 3. And we're going to have that row 3 go to a resistor, which is then going to go to ground. So I'm going to go to my toolbox over here and pull out one of my jumper wires. And this one is just going to be the one space. I'm going to jump from row 3 to row 4. Right there. I'm just going to place it in. Jostle a little bit with the tweezers. Once you have it in position, just push it down with your finger. Remember, the tweezers are just there to position the part in the holes and make sure it can get eased in. You use your finger to lightly but firmly apply pressure to push it in. I'm now going to take one of my resistors here, and we're going to have to lead form this and trim it. So these metal wires that come off of these components are called leads, and in a professional setting like a factory, they call fixtures that automatically bend these and lead. They call them lead forming fixtures, and the act of forming these leads into shapes is just called lead forming. Okay, gonna trim it. There we go. Now that we've trimmed it, we're going to just place it lightly but carefully with our precision tweezers here. There we go. And the amount you need to lead form might vary, like the lengths here. I just happen to have trimmed it the perfect length because I've been doing this for a very long time and I can eyeball it pretty well. If you have to guess and test and try a few things out just to get it fit in, that's fine. Alright, so let's plug it in and make sure this LED actually turns on. Okay, there we go. Huh, and it doesn't. What did I do? Oh. LED was flipped around the wrong way. My anode was going into the anode and cathode there were switched. So now we're good. See? General rule, if your LED is not lighting up and you're just beginning, check the inside of the LED, try flipping it around, seeing if it works, putting it back the way you found it. So there we go. Our next step is going to be to put a button for the boot strap. Now, that is for, in section 3.3.3, that's the bootload switch. The way this switch is going to work is that when you press the button, an LED will light up, telling you that you have a digital signal high coming. So, if we look at our good, we have row 33, no, I'm sorry, that's row 35 and row 37. I'm going to span it. It doesn't matter, this little middle tab here, doesn't really matter which side you put it on for this switch. I'm going to put it facing to the right just for consistency. But for this button it doesn't matter. The next button it will. Okay, so I'm going to need a jumper, orange jumper from 35 right, so the right side of the breadboard. Row number 35 to power. There we go. Not bad. Very nice. Huh, the breadboard has a defect in it. It actually has a blanked out hole. Interesting. We've got a resistor going to ground on the other side. Okay, so we have the same LED circuit. And I've already trimmed this LED. So, no big deal. Okay. Place that right here. I've already trimmed that LED. No lead forming is necessary since these LEDs happen to have a 1/10 of an inch spacing between them. So they just insert nicely right there. I'm going to take my pre-trimmed resistor, which is going to ground. I'll get my hand in the way here for a second so I can position this. There we go. There we go. Positioned, placed, good. I skipped a step, which is to unplug this header here. Usually I recommend not powering the board while you're working on it. But you can see here the button works. What you're doing is this button is bridging both sides together as if it was just a piece of wire. So it's like there's no wire there now. Now there is one. So you have the exact same circuit we just built up here, down here. You have power coming in to one side of the switch. When I press the button, that bridges that side of the switch to this side of the switch, which allows power to go to the anode of this LED, out to the cathode, to a resistor, to ground. Exact same circuit. Okay. We're going to now make the reset button, which is right here. That one's a little bit more complicated, and it does have a preference for which side we put the tab because we're going to need to use that row. So we're going to keep that row empty. this tactile switch is going to row 20 and row 18. Middle tab is on this side of the board, to the left side of the board. There we go. Now I've positioned it, just place it with your finger. We're going to have a red LED. Here's my red LED. It looks like it's just one row, so we don't need to lead form it. I'm just going to trim it. It looks like we have a resistor going to ground here, so that means that the cathode is going to go there. Going to go on row 19. So, cathode right there. And a resistor, which I've already trimmed and lead formed. That's going to go to ground here. And now I'm doubting my sanity. Let me pull this out and check. Yes, that's correct. Okay. We have a wire bridge to ground. Oh, I have to remove my power again. That power LED is useful. It tells you if your board is actually powered. Anytime you're working with this board, this should be off. I'll be adhering to my own rules from here on out. I promise. Ground to switch. Yeah. There we go. Positioned in. If you're treating this thing harshly, if you are really applying a lot of force, then you're definitely doing it wrong. Electronics is not a medium for the burly, let me put it that way. Just about any and all electronics are made easy. Okay, so we have a resistor here going to row 21 left. That's going to go to the microcontroller in a little bit. So that's why we're putting it there. You see that you have this resistor here and then a bridge going to the switch. I guess electrically it would make no difference going one way or the other, whether it's on row 21 or row 20, but I just like to be consistent here. These come out of the box a little bit wide, so I like to give them a little squeeze. There we go. Just jostle it, position it, position it. There we go, one's being stubborn, but oh, popped out. Light amount of pressure, there we go. That one required a little more pressure than usual. Too much is bad, not enough is, not enough. Okay, let's try giving power to the board here. Ha! So, that was section 3.3.4. I'm sorry I didn't announce it properly. This is the reset button. It is on whenever this button is not pressed. But when you do press the button, it pulls the whole circuit off. It turns it all off. The pathway that we have here is that we have a resistor going from power to the side of the switch. These two sides of the switch here are common already. So you have a resistor from power over to through the switch to this LED and then to ground. So that's the path there. But when I press this button, you have this wire here pulling that to ground. So it pulls this directly to ground. And that's why this turns off, because you have ground here and ground on the other side of the LED resistor pair. And you'll be able to see that schematic right down below here. Okay. Now we're going to go to section 3.3.5. That's the placement of the microcontroller. Now, there we go. Power off. Now with these, any of these integrated circuits, you have an indicator for pin 1, and it's very important to align these properly. If I plug this in backwards, I could damage the chip because you'd be applying power to a side that is not supposed to have power. You have a little indentation at the top here that tells you that pin 1 is on this side, and you have a little circle right here telling you this is pin 1. When in doubt, Google the name of the chip. Let's see if you can read that. That's the ATmega. Nah, you probably can't. That's the ATmega 328P on here. If you Google that chip, you will get the data sheet, and that is pretty much your Bible for that chip. It'll tell you everything you need to know, and its word trumps all. So if you need any clarification on anything, go to the data sheet. If we look at the data sheet, and I have the graphic right down below here, we see a pin out. We have VCC pins and we have ground pins. VCC means power, so that needs to go into these red rails. Ground are the blue rails, of course. So right now I'm using the model over here on the left here, 25, 26, 27. So row 27. Since we're being completely consistent across this one breadboard to the next, I can use the row numbers to set everything. If I wasn't being consistent, I would have to consult the data sheet as I'm doing this. And if you want to talk stressful, consult the data sheet on a camera, or while you're on camera. There we go. Directly across, we have jump to VCC. Here we go. My advice to anyone who is making circuits is that after you put your wires in place, really sit and trace out every connection and make sure that's the correct connection. Because I know it might seem like it takes a lot of time and is really tedious, and you're correct, it is tedious to check every single connection before you power it up. It's going to take a lot less time than rebuilding the entire circuit from scratch and still not knowing why it blew up. If you don't check your connections, you can really damage some things. Time spent thinking is not time wasted. Okay. We also have this yellow LED here I'm going to place, because powering up this microcontroller is going to be pretty pointless if I can't see if it's actually programmed properly. So we're going to do a little bit more lead forming. I'm going to take my flat nose pliers here. Get these out of the way so I don't visually pollute. Okay, flat nose pliers. And you don't need a resistor when the output's coming out of this particular microcontroller, because this microcontroller has current limiting already built in place. So we're not going to fry the LED. You want to take the anode. We're not going to fry the LED if we drive it directly from the microcontroller. Alright, let me place it in with one leg sticking out. There we go. Okay, so I can get an idea for where to bend it. There we go. Boom. Boom. Okay, trim it. Okay. I was a little short there. Oh, no, we're good. We're good. Okay. Alright, let's power this guy up and see what happens. Aha! So there we go. There's an important element that I've forgotten from section 3.3.5. There is a jumper pin, or there's a jumper wire from here to here. So this microcontroller has a pin floating, and that's no good. So let me take my jumper wire. If I place a circuit, remove power, always better safe than sorry. There's a saying, it's better to ask for forgiveness than permission. And with humans, that's fine, but with Mother Nature and her electronics and her technology, I find it much better that asking Mother Nature for forgiveness. She does not forgive. She will make you rebuild your circuit from scratch. All right. So obviously this microcontroller is doing something. It's blinking a light. And what more could we hope for? We have this reset button, which we have tied to pin number 1 on the microcontroller. Looking at the data sheet here, we see that pin 1 goes to reset. And that's exactly like if you were to hold the reset button on your computer. What it does is when this light is on, the microcontroller has the ability to run. But when we press it, everything stops, because what we're doing is we're putting into reset mode. It's not going to run this program while it's in reset mode. The program that it has out of the box, and then I have as a demonstration, is just a blinky light code. But if you press the bootload button, let me see if it works. There we go. Press the bootload button, it blinks a lot faster. This program is there to prove out your electrical connections. It's kind of like a test for your breadboarding abilities. If you've built this circuit right, this will blink quickly. Blink, 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 blink. But by default, it should just blink slowly. Now, there's one, oops, dropped it. One other thing we need to do, and that's check to make sure that we can enter bootload mode. Now, this is just a sanity check. We have all the electronics here to do it. Entering bootload mode means holding the reset button, holding the bootload button. You'll tell because the LED is on there, the green LED down there. Release the reset button. You should see 2 blinks and then 4 blinks quickly, and then it should just not blink again. So let's do that one more time. The 4 blinks tells you that we're in bootload mode. That means we're ready to start putting new software into the chip. The 2 blinks is just, it performs those 2 blinks anytime it powers up. That's to let you know that it has the bootloader in it. But if it doesn't blink the 4 times after that, then it's going to the operational code that you've programmed in, or the default code that I programmed in. My default code is to just blink forever. All right. Now there's one more thing we need to do before we can start programming this microcontroller. We need to actually have the communication lines going from the breadboard header to the microcontroller here. So we're going to remove power once again. And if you take a look at our sample here, we have a pretty long wires we have to do. We have to use. You definitely want to use long enough, and there's such a thing as too long. Hopefully with the wire kit, if you've purchased the same one that I purchased, these yellow wires here are perfect for that, unless they've changed the color. They might have changed the color. So just check the length on this. I believe this one is the 3-inch, but I'm not sure. I'll have a correction down here in the space below to tell you which length of wire I'm using here. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to have to come out directly this way and then come down and then hook around. So what I always do for this, let me get this guy out of the way. Starting from pin 2, right here, we're going to place our wire. And it doesn't really matter which hole you plug into, whether you do to the right or to the left here, because there should be plenty of extra. Now I'm just placing this in as a length estimator, right? Measurement always trumps calculation, so I just measure. I don't bother calculating. There we go. Make a decent 90 degree. It's a little bit jarred, but that's okay. I'm even going to take power off the BrEdHead because this wire is getting pretty close to the BrEdHead's electrical connections there. Okay, now this wire from pin 2 needs to go down to, trace it out. Aha, the RxD pin. See, that's the advantage of having a clean breadboard, is I can actually read what's going on without having to look at a schematic. Trust me. Keeping everything clean and nice is just there to save time. It's not a waste of time. It's not like an English paper where it's entirely subjective. This is breadboarding techniques that I ended up developing just on the job. So what I'm doing is I'm pulling out all the resistors and the wires, because I don't like having the communication lines sticking out over them. Yeah, leads are somewhat spring-loaded. They'll jump around on you. There we go. I'm actually going to use these wires here to hold these communication lines down. Actually, I'm just going to remove them because I got another communication line I need to do anyway. So I'm just going to pop these out. There we go. Everything's fastened down. This line is going to come out of pin 3, and it's going to come out of pin 3, and it's going to go to the TXD pin there. So right here. Okay. There we go. Bend it over there. Estimate the length. Your breadboard doesn't need to be absolutely perfect to be pretty darn good, breadboard. But the better you can get it, the easier it'll be for you. If you do it right, you do it once. Do it wrong, do it again. And if you're a beginner at this, just get ready to do it again a lot. If you have to pull wires out, if you don't like the way something looks, if you don't like the way something sits, there's no shame in doing it again. It is a bit of a pain, but trust me, it's a lot easier than trying to trudge through it. So this is pin 25, 26, 27. So pin 27 went to power. Place of the tweezers. We're getting kind of close to real time here. There we go. Okay. Resistor. Went from ground to cathode of the LED. Boom, boom. We are good. I'm going to put the USB, actually I'm going to put the jumper in first. Now I'm going to place the USB connector in. Aha, perfect. Okay, we're in bootload mode now. And I'm going to go to my computer and show you exactly what happens once you're in bootload mode and you have the communication lines in place. Now we are going to be ready to, this is all the hardware you need to put whatever program you want on here. Now whether or not that program does anything is going to depend on what else you put in here. So if you need a humidity temperature sensor, you're going to need to put it on this board somehow and then connect that to the microcontroller. And I'll show you in videos later. If you check out the next video that I'll be making, that will be for how to verify this is working. So that's section 3.4, and also how to program your very first demo software on here. The demo software is going to change the frequency at which we blink this light. And if you want to do the demo deluxe, there'll be a video on that, and that's going to make this blink Morse code of your own special message. All right. And thank you for watching.